The Ten Commandments. This is a lesson on 10 principles of proper comma usage. Hi, my name is Chad, and in this quick video, I will teach you how to correctly use the comma in English sentences. The first commandment of proper comma usage involves commas with introductory elements. Use a comma after an introductory element, word, phrase, or clause that is not the subject of the sentence. If the introductory element is less than 5 words, then the comma may be optional. Consider these examples. As you climb out of bed in the morning, remember whose light you are and what treasure you hold in your jar of clay. Place a comma after the subordinate clause to signal the main clause. This introductory element is longer than 5 words, so a comma is necessary. With hope, she turned to see if her daughter was okay. The comma is unnecessary, though optional, after the short 2-word phrase, with hope. How about the next one? After a fight, time is a balm. This introductory element is less than 5 words. However, the comma is needed here. Though optional, the comma helps to avoid confusion. Time, not fight time, is the subject. What we forgot is that we have no rainfly for our tent. What we forgot is a noun clause functioning as the subject, so no comma is necessary. Noun clauses can be tricky, but if you take your time and identify the subject and verb of the independent clause, you should be able to recognize that no comma is necessary, even though you might feel like there should be one. The second commandment of proper comma usage involves commas with coordinating conjunctions. Use a comma in front of coordinating conjunctions, and, but, for, nor, or, so, and yet, that join 2 complete sentences, independent clause plus any dependent elements. Look at these 2 examples. Drinking too much water can deplete the body of nutrients, but drinking too little water can lead to dehydration. The comma is necessary because the conjunction, but, joins 2 independent clauses. We walked to the store and talked along the way. Do not include a comma before the conjunction and, because the conjunction is only joining a compound verb and not 2 independent clauses. The third commandment of proper comma usage involves commas with transitional expressions. Use a comma or commas to set off transitional expressions. However, therefore, moreover, for example, on the other hand, in fact, etc. Note these sentences. Our lives, however, are like vapors that vanish in a moment. Enclose the transitional expression, however, with commas. My language learning skills, for example, need improvement. Enclose the transitional expression, for example, with commas. Therefore, we must not lose heart. Enclose the transitional expression, therefore, with a comma. These transitional expressions interrupt or are detached from the main line flow of the sentence, so they need to be set off by commas. The fourth commandment of proper comma usage also involves commas with transitional expressions. Use a semicolon and then a comma around transitional expressions that connect 2 independent clauses. Consider these examples. Critics overlook the evidence of degeneration. Moreover, they disregard the research performed by those who disagree with their conclusions. Place a semicolon before the transitional expression, moreover, and a comma after it because the transitional expression joins 2 independent clauses. Many suppress the truth. Therefore, few can discern the truth from lies. Place a semicolon before the transitional expression, therefore, and a comma after it because the transitional expression joins 2 independent clauses. The fifth commandment of proper comma usage involves commas with items in a series. Use a comma after each item in a series. Also note that items in a series must be parallel. The last serial comma cannot be omitted unless all the items are connected by the word and. Check out these examples. Now faith, hope, and love abide. Place a serial comma after each item in the series, each item that precedes the conjunction. I still need to order my books and fill out my calendar and set my work schedule. Do not include a serial comma between items in a series if all the items are connected by a conjunction. Note that repeating and, like this, is a very informal way of connecting items in a series. The final comma before the conjunction is often called the Oxford comma because around the turn of the 20th century, Oxford University and Harvard University publishers promoted its use when many others did not. Some still omit the final comma before the conjunction, and although you may occasionally do so without confusion, omitting the Oxford comma can sometimes lead to confusion, inadvertently grouping items in a series. Note the differences between these 2 sentences. We went out with John, my wife, and your mother. We went out with John, my wife, and your mother. Note how we identify John differs between sentences simply because of where we place the comma. In the first sentence, my wife and your mother is in a positive misattributed to John. In the second, my wife and your mother are two additional characters distinct from John. It is generally advisable for the sake of parallelism, consistency, and clarity to use the Oxford comma when listing items in a series. The sixth commandment of proper comma usage involves commas with non-restrictive additions. Use commas to set off non-essential or non-restrictive additions to a sentence. Do not use commas to set off essential or restrictive words, phrases, or clauses. Look at these sentences. Perelandra, which was written by C.S. Lewis, is the second book in his space trilogy. The commas are necessary because the phrase is non-restrictive. It does not narrow or restrict the meaning of the noun Perelandra, which it modifies. The paper that I found in your bag will work well as a score sheet. No commas are necessary because that I found in your bag narrows or restricts the meaning of the noun paper, clarifying what paper I am referring to. The seventh commandment of proper comma usage involves commas with coordinate and cumulative adjectives. Add a comma between coordinate adjectives, which are adjectives that can be joined by and. Do not use a comma between cumulative adjectives, which are adjectives that cannot be joined by and. Consider these examples. The playful, tireless, clumsy kitten darted behind the fridge. Place a comma between these adjectives. You know they are coordinate adjectives because you could place conjunctions between them. Playful and tireless and clumsy. The one small Italian sub is mine. Do not place a comma between these adjectives. You know they are cumulative because you would not say one and small and Italian. The eighth commandment of proper comma usage involves commas with quoted material. Use a comma or commas to separate a direct quotation from the rest of the sentence, unless the quotation is preceded by an independent clause, other than a phrase like he said or she remarked. In that case, use a colon. If the word that precedes the quotation, then omit the comma. Check out these examples. In response to her declaration, Jesus said, I am the resurrection and the life. Place a comma after Jesus said to separate the quotation from the rest of the sentence. Although Jesus said is an independent clause, you still need a comma because short introductory expressions like he or she said are conventionally followed by a comma. Jesus identified himself as life itself. I am the resurrection and the life. Do not use a comma after Jesus identified himself as life itself, since this formal introduction is an independent clause. Instead, use a colon to separate the quotation. How about the next sentence? They wrote that no threat of imprisonment will thwart the cause. Do not use a comma after that, since the quotation is blended into the flow of the sentence. I thirst. Bring me water, she exclaimed. Do not add a comma after a quotation that starts a sentence if the quotation ends with an exclamation point or question mark. Otherwise, add a comma after the quotation. The ninth commandment of proper comma usage involves comma splices. Learn to recognize and avoid comma splices. A comma splice occurs when two complete sentences are joined by only a comma, creating a run-on sentence. Repair comma splices in one of four ways. First, add a conjunction after the comma. Second, turn the comma into a period and begin a new sentence. Third, turn the comma into a semicolon. And fourth, turn one of the sentences into a dependent clause. Notice how these four kinds of revision correct the comma splice in the following sentence. The eyes can see physical realities. Faith can see spiritual realities, which is a comma splice. First, the eyes can see physical realities, comma, but faith can see spiritual realities. Second, the eyes can see physical realities, period. Faith can see spiritual realities. Third, the eyes can see physical realities, semicolon, faith can see spiritual realities. Fourth, although the eyes can see physical realities, comma, faith can see spiritual realities. The 10th commandment of proper comma usage involves misplaced commas. Thou shalt not put commas where they do not belong. First, do not separate major elements of a sentence, especially the subject and verb. Second, do not use a comma before a conjunction if an independent clause does not follow it. And third, do not add a comma after the final item in a series. Consider these examples. First, hunger, like every other desire, can be easily misdirected. Let's correct this one so the subject and verb are not separated. Like every other desire, hunger can be easily misdirected. Second, writing involves practice and requires patience. We know that we can omit this comma since we are only dealing with a compound verb and not two independent clauses. Writing involves practice and requires patience. Third, we watch the dogs, the kids, and a movie in the living room. To fix this one, we can drop the comma. We watch the dogs, the kids, and a movie in the living room. This video has described the 10 commandments of proper comma usage. I hope you found this quick lesson helpful. For further resources on grammar and punctuation, check out our website and other videos on our channel. Thank you, and keep writing.